Hello, bore da, pnawn da, noswaith. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Welcome back to week 3 of the Olwen shawl Olwen. And I'm just going to recap for you briefly. So you started out with your cast on and your main color and working the increase and decreases to create the triangular shaping and to get an understanding of that. That was section 1, week 1. Week 2, you started to move on to the stripes and create areas where you're knitting and then purling one side, so you get a nice flat front stitch, whereas if you knit every row, you get the ribbing. And then alongside that, creating a triangle along one side, you're doing something that is akin to moss stitch, where you are knitting one, purling one, in order to get a nice textured feeling going down one side of your shawl. So these are all knit purl stitches, and it's just about how you do it and what color you do it in that's giving you your pattern at the moment. And we're going to carry on in the same way. So for that second section, just let me move my ball wool there. For that second section, you've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 golden stripes, and for the next section you are going to carry on with the stripes, but we are going to change colors. So you're going to bring the second contrast color in, which in my case is this variegated turquoise color. Keep the gold yellow as your main stripe, because these start to not only mimic the tasks of Olwen, but they also start to represent the rays of the sun as the sun goddess Olwen starts to come into our shawl. And how that happens is that you start getting a flat section here in the moss stitch area that will become your circular sun. Okay, so if we just work through some of this, just to remind you of the stitches. So I've already started, I've done my knit and my knit front back at that end, knitting along because I'm on a knit row section to create the ribbed stripe. Okay, I'm just going to bring my knitting up because it's getting quite long now. I've already done a couple of these stripes. So if I just focus, make sure you can see my fingers. Okay, so I am knitting along. I'm going to carry on knitting because I've got a few more stitches here to do. And then I will just give you some of the prompts and the reminders as we go along this line for this section. So the really important thing, again, is to just remember to bring your yarn back and forth with your knit and purl stitches as you get into the moss section. And then also to remember to wrap your yarn at the back, especially when you switch colors, so that you are not leaving a hole, but are creating an area where those yarns interact and overlap, twist around each other essentially. So as I get to the end of my knit, this is my knit 91, which it always makes the stripe, and you'll see that I've tried to keep that continuous for you so you recognize it, that there is always those 91 stitches. And it should bring you to one stitch before the previous. So if I look on the back here, I've got my stitch there, and that's my 91. So I've got one stitch left before I then change. That's to keep my diagonal going. Okay, so I've got my turquoise variegated there. I'm going to bring my gold around that to make sure that it's going to catch it. And then just a reminder that when you're doing the moss stitch, you need to alternate. So if that's a purl the previous row, a knit the previous row, a purl the previous row, then you've got to have opposite. So this one's going to be a purl, knit, purl, knit. Okay, so I'm going to bring my yellow forward. It's wrapped around my turquoise. I'm going to purl, knit, and you see I'm moving my gold back and forth, purl to the back, knit to the front, 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 purl to the back, knit, and you carry on like this until you get to the area that is your sun. And on the sun section, I've already done a few rows here, so I'm already quite developed on this side of my sun. Initially, you won't have so many stitches on your sun on one side, and you'll have more on the other. Okay, so I'm approaching it here. I'm going to knit and a purl. Okay, so just a reminder, if we can see this, I've got a purl, knit, purl to start, and then you do so many more of those sequences. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 more of the knit purl before you start your sun section. And I'm at the middle of my sun at the moment, so I'm at the highest count of knits, and which is 28. 2, so I'm just knitting along normally here in this section. That's 11. $20. 25, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that's my sun section. You can see how it's developing as a circle. And then what I just need to make sure is that when I start this, it should be in the pattern, but you can always double check that I'm then starting the alternate of this pattern. So if this is a purl stitch, I'm going to start with a knit stitch there, then go a knit, purl, knit. So knit. Oh, I said that wrong. I said it right, but I did it wrong. Yep, so I'm going to start with a purl. No, I did it right. I shouldn't second guess myself sometimes. So it's a purl stitch there. So it's a knit, purl, knit to start with. So knit, purl, knit. And then you carry on in that sequence till you get to the end. And if you are on a third row, then you know that this would be a knit two together at the end. This is not a third row in my sequence, but that is your decrease row. Your third of every 4 rows, remember, is your decrease. Okay, so, and you always end on a knit stitch. Okay, knit, and then I'm ready to turn. Okay, so this is quite straightforward. It's just a matter of counting and tracking and watching what you're doing just to make sure that your pattern is following. Hopefully I've got all the pattern instructions right for you, but do keep an eye on those moss stitches so that you are going a purl over a knit and a knit over a purl every alternate row, so that you get that nice texture continuing. And then when you carry on those solid knit rows, just remember that at the back of your shawl, you're doing those as purls so that it carries along. And your stripes, when you're on the rib section, are just straight knits again. When you're on the flat section at the back, purls. Okay, I hope this is going to go along well for you, and you will start to see the circular sun developing, and then we will be on to week 4 before you know it. Look forward to seeing you then. Ta-ra! Yes, I thought I was done, but as I was knitting along the back, I thought of just a couple more things I wanted to accentuate to you. So the first is when you come to the back, again, you are knitting one over before you start your 91. In this case, it'll be a knit 91. And make sure you cross over your yarn so you bring that turquoise over the gold in that case. But then I also just wanted to remind you about the floats. So as you come up the stripes, you will drop one color temporarily before you pick it back up a few rows. So in this case, it's my variegated turquoise yarn, and that one gets dropped while I knit the gold stripe, and then it gets picked back up, and it leaves you with a little float. Just make sure you pull that float as tight as you can without making it too scrunched up in your knitting, and that will just make sure you don't have a hole there. So just a reminder that you will have those floats along the back at the stripes, and to pull them tight as you come to them. When you pick your yarn, which is your CC2 yarn, your contrast color 2, back up in order to keep knitting. Okay, so don't worry about those, they just go neatly into the pattern and run along that edge, and will all look very nice and tidy for you as you get going. Okay, enjoy. Mwynhau.